Welcome to part 2 of our cell production story. In our first segment, we discussed chromosomes, how they contain genes, which are the instructions for building a single protein, and kind of how the chromosomes were organized, and some details about chromosomes. Today we're going to talk about the nucleus. The nucleus is an inner plasma membrane. Now, plasma membrane is just a fancy word for phospholipid bilayer. So the cell membrane is a plasma membrane. The nuclear membrane is a plasma membrane. They are very similar to each other. They are not identical. There are proteins, carbohydrates, other lipids embedded in the cell membrane, and the same is true of the nuclear membrane, and there is some variation between the two. There's overlap between the two, but there's also some variation. So they're not exactly the same. The nuclear membrane serves to surround and protect the chromosomes that we discussed from part 1. Now, that is a luxury function. There are plenty of cells in domain bacteria and domain archaea, in fact all of them, that do not have nucleuses. It is not a critical, mandatory requirement that a cell has a nucleus. It's a luxury. It's a evolved quality from this branch, the eukaryotes, to have this nucleus in the first place, and it does provide a lot of protection for the DNA. That allows the DNA to be a little more reliable. These cells are a little slightly more genetically hardy than bacteria or archaea might be. Though there are compensatory adaptations in bacteria and archaea to get over the lack of nucleus. So they're doing all right. Don't get me wrong. They're doing just fine without a nucleus. But it is still a luxury to have this extra layer of protection around your chromosomes. The nucleus is embedded with nuclear pores. And this is important because if we're going to sequester this DNA, we still need to get the information to the cell machinery to make the proteins. So when a gene is copied into mRNA, that little snippet, that copy of the DNA, can leave through the nuclear pores. But DNA can't leave through those nuclear pores. So it's a good system. We can send the message out, but we keep the original information safe and contained. DNA is often considered to be like the control center, the command center, the brain of the cell. All of those make sense when you're looking at the cell under a microscope and you're seeing messages leave the you're seeing messages leave the nucleus. The cell starts making proteins and then using those proteins to do things. It seems like the nucleus has said, hey, it's time for this now and it's time for that now. Fine, the analogy makes sense. But one of the problems with that analogy is it implies that the nucleus is making a decision. And that's not exactly what is happening. What is happening is the cell membrane is getting in contact from chemical messages from outside the cell, and sometimes there are chemical messages that are generated within the cell that reach the nucleus. When these chemicals reach the nucleus, it starts a chain reaction, a chemical chain reaction that results in specific genes being copied. We spoke earlier about steroids can promote the production of specific proteins. They do this because they'll get accepted into the nucleus, and then they will interact with specific sections of the DNA to make this protein. Well, we're going to copy the instructions of this gene. We're going to make a lot of mRNA of this gene, but not these other guys over here. So the cell ends up making a lot of that specific protein compared to the others. So the nucleus responds to external and internal chemical signals to promote the production of specific proteins. It's not choosing, it's responding. That is why a developing embryo will go through different developmental stages, because not only are they getting internal signals, they're also getting external signals from the mother to promote specific growth at specific times. We need specific proteins to be developed at different stages, and those proteins are determined based on the chemical chain reactions that are occurring, not just within the cells, but surrounding the outside of the cells. So there's your nucleus. Plasma membrane, phospholipid bilayer, surround and protect the chromosomes, nuclear pores for mRNA to leave, responds to chemical signals, to promote specific protein production. I hope this helps. Struggle well.